Hi, I'm Hajar Dalwal, and I'm with the Windows commercial team at Microsoft. I'm really excited for this episode as I'm on campus at Microsoft head office in Redmond, Washington, to speak in person with a subject matter expert on Microsoft privacy. With that said, let me welcome my special guest,
Divya, thank you so much, Harijit, for the warm welcome. I'm really excited to be here, to be talking about an area where I'm very passionate about. I lead the Windows privacy team, and our mission is to ensure that we ship the most privacy compliant version of Windows and help preserve what we call the fundamental right for our customers, which is privacy. And I take great pride in that work. I'm so really excited here to be talking about great set of innovations and how we enable privacy.
That's excellent, excellent. So lately, there's a lot of buzz around, the announcements of Microsoft Copilot and Copilot in Windows, right? So, and there's also some confusion with which Copilot is which and stuff like that. So let's start there, right? Is Copilot in Windows something that is available for all Windows editions?
Great question. It can get pretty confusing, but Copilot in Windows is currently available for all customers that have the latest version of Windows, which is 22H2, which we announced last week. Super
That's right.
excited, bunch of new features coming out, Copilot being one. And you can always subscribe to our insider program to get early preview into some of the innovations that's happening within Copilot and other AI features.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought too. So does Copilot in Windows then refer to a specific AI functionality, or is it just like an umbrella catch term?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think of Copilot as this tool set available that can help enhance productivity, kind of like your personal assistant, can help get done, easy tasks. AI is just going to be integrated, right? Like we have apps that will be using AI-powered experiences. Think Co-Creator in Paint. You can, invoke that through Copilot. You can use Copilot, send prompts in like natural language, and you can activate applications. But it's just kind of like that entry point for you to be able to discover and do things within your PC that otherwise would have to discover and search for.
Okay.
But like to that point, AI is going to be really embedded in different experiences within Windows.
Within Windows?
Yes.
Including things like accessibility, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about Microsoft 365 Copilot? Does that work together with Windows, with Copilot in Windows, or is it separate?
That's a great question. So Bing Chat Enterprise is a generative AI service which is grounded in public web. It's trained in data from the public web. It doesn't have access to organizational content within a tenant boundary. So, for example, OneDrive, your Word files, PowerPoint, etc.
Okay.
For that, there is M365 Copilot. So M365 Copilot is required if you are dealing with organizational data that can help you make sense with those personal sort of like documentation. So that's kind of like I would differentiate BCE and M365. Copilot.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask you. Like, what's the difference between Bing Chat and Bing Chat Enterprise? And it's just easier to say Bing Chat, right? But we also emphasize that it's not the same.
It is, yeah, and and there's an additional layer, Bing Chat, which is our consumer offering. So we have Copilot with Bing Chat. There's Copilot with Bing Chat for enterprises with additional protection for our enterprise customers. Where we differentiate, with Bing Chat, we ensure that the data that we collect, we minimize data collection. The data that we collect is de-identified and anonymized. For chat history, for the data that we collect, we provide users for the ability to actually go to privacy dashboard and delete that data. And obviously, we never collect any data without consent. We provide consent as the users are interacting with this chat experience to collect the data. For us to be able to provide that service, and then to store it for some period of time. But we offer deletion, etc., and honor sort of like all privacy
Okay.
principles.
Yeah, I was going to ask about, Bing Chat Enterprise, if it offers additional protections for organizations.
It does. So Bing Chat Enterprise, we don't store or collect, log any data. So think about it. You are interacting with this chat provider, which is Bing Chat, and Windows Copilot being the canvas. You enter a prompt. The prompt is then sent to the Bing servers, and they store it temporarily to be able to provide you with that chat experience.
Oh.
What we call required data.
Okay.
But we delete that data automatically, and we don't store that data. So we only retain the data to be able to provide you with that experience, which is very transient for that session, and then we delete that data. So we don't log or store any data.
I see. So I just learned something new, actually, that I didn't realize that that's how it works. So this is really good for...
Yeah, and there's a lot of we are very transparent with what we collect in terms of data. So you can actually go to microsoft.com/privacy and read about the type of data that we collect, why do we have to collect for enterprises, for consumers. We have our Microsoft privacy statement. So we have different layers of transparency documentation that I highly encourage our customers to actually go and read in terms of like what kind of data do we process, how do we collect, what do we use it for, how long do we store it, things like that.
Okay. To ease our customers, right, our commercial customers. So if they say, like, how do I trust? Is there like a mechanism for them to see, like, what is being prompted and things like that, and what is being stored, even temporarily? And
so they can. So we have privacy dashboard, AMC account.microsoft.com/privacy, where consumers can actually go and view their data, and they can actually request for that data to be deleted.
Okay.
It is slightly different for enterprises.
That's
because for an enterprise customers, the IT admins are in control with how they deploy these features. So for example, for Windows Copilot, which is in preview for our Pro and SKUs, IT admins can actually manage Windows Copilot through MDM or group policies. So they have a control. They can enable or disable for their information workers. And then the information workers can obviously engage with Copilot as necessary. We don't store that data because we don't provide that capability because we provide that capability to the admins rather than to the information workers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So along the same lines, I think IT pros will ask, like, does Copilot and Windows utilize Microsoft Graph APIs?
Yeah, great question. At this point in time, we don't refer to the organizational data in Microsoft Graph simply because we don't log it. We just provide the chat experience. We don't provide any, we don't collect that data or refer to any sort of like personalization of Graph. Yeah.
So can an organization pick and choose what they want to collect and send, or is it more of a situational basis?
Oh, I love that question. I think that's definitely a desire. We want to. This experience is so empowering. I think we develop these features because we see a lot of customer value. We always start with customer value, and there's a lot of customer value with Copilot. And we want our customers to feel confident. We want them to feel safe when using this technology.
That's right.
We have obviously a switch available to IT admins, but we want to, the direction we want to go is we really want to provide them with granular controls where they can actually pick and choose what data to send, what data to not send, so then they can feel more confident in using Copilot. So there's definitely something that's in the works, and you will hear and see.
It's in the works.
It's in the works. You'll hear and more about this, in the upcoming months. It's definitely. I think we will see. We hear our customers, and we really want them to. To use this capability, which is just so empowering.
That is wonderful. So taking the next step further, right? Can an organization and the IT department invoke and configure policies, settings, or plugins?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. Right now, Windows Copilot with BCE is available to customers that have that the right license. Once they have the license, the IT pros can actually enable the policy for Windows Copilot with BCE through MDM or Intune, and they can configure it for their information workers. We have documentation available on, I think, on tech community, etc., which we can obviously refer to in how to do so. And we provide that overall like control for them to be able to manage this feature for their information workers.
Okay, so if this comes up, every now and then, like they want controls, they want.
Yes.
Is this something that IT departments can and say, hey, you know what, we don't want Copilot in Windows? Can they do that, right?
Absolutely. One of the commitments that we have for our commercial customers in Windows is these experiences that you talk about, Windows Copilot, these are called connected experiences. And what that means is there is a data that is sent, that leaves the tenant boundary, it comes to Microsoft to be able to provide that experience.
Right.
And we provide enterprises with the ability to manage that experience because we understand they may not be comfortable in some of that data. So we provide network blocking capability. We provide different sort of like ability for them to be able to, turn that thing off. And that's where we invest heavily in what kind of controls do we provide, policies via MDM for them to be able to manage.
Right.
And going back to your earlier question, to drive adoption, we don't want them to simply turn this thing off. And that's where we want them with granular set of controls where they can actually pick and choose with their comfort, how they want to use. So that's kind of like the direction we want to go, but that's definitely what we do.
It's similar to, the security features, between Windows 10 and 11, right? They're similar, except that Windows 10, they were off, right? And Windows 11, we enabled them, and IT is able to, turn them off if they want to, but they shouldn't.
Right.
So similar concept here, I believe.
Absolutely.
What about information workers? Are they able to opt out if they don't want to use Copilot, or is that really controlled by their organization?
Yes, so we provide that, in situations like these, it's the IT admins are the controller in how they want to manage the feature for their organization. So they will enable it, and then obviously information workers are empowered to whether use it or not use it. And then we obviously don't log that data. So that's kind of like we leave the decision on the ID admins and pros to decide for their organization.
Right,
and then obviously information worker can choose whether they want to engage or not engage.
Or not, right? Yeah. So we're giving them all the powers, right, to handle this.
Yeah, and it's a safe way. Generative AI, it's kind of like all over the place. You don't want to use publicly available solutions. You rather use something which is in-house, more protected.
Right.
Offers more privacy protection. So it just makes everybody's job easier.
Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Copilot in Windows uses a lot of data, right? Because it's getting a lot of like signals and things like that to provide the experience or information back. What about is there reindexing, any reindexing of this data is initiated and stuff like that?
Yeah, no, great question. At this point in time, Bing service, obviously it's trained on the data that's available on the web. And we use that, so as a user, when you prompt the service, it goes to the service to get you the relevant responses. But at this point in time, we don't use that data to train the models or to store, for that matter, for a longer period of time. And we just use what we have publicly available information for the large language models to be able to provide that relevant response.
So what do you think could be some really interesting uses of Copilot Windows in organizations? Like, if there's an example, like, something really cool that they can do with this.
Oh, absolutely. I love that question. I think the possibilities are limitless as we'll see more integration come into play. One of the things that, you may ask, like, what differentiates Copilot in Windows from Bing Chat experience? Obviously, Windows Copilot uses Bing Chat as a chat provider.
Right.
One of the additional things it does is you can do skills. You can do more with the Windows side of it. So, for example, I want to turn on dark mode. You can simply, in natural language, write that
Yeah.
versus navigating to a setting for dark mode, which is buried somewhere. So I think it's very, in a sense where it will saves you a lot of time. And then, with as we bring in more plugins, you can actually just invoke applications. You can just do tasks by simply writing the command in natural language. So I think it just saves a lot of time.
Right.
It helps with, you don't have to go looking for information. It helps with the discovery.
That's a beautiful. And I know there's like, even the prompts, right? There's a technique I understand. Like, you just don't simply ask. You got to give it like context and stuff like that, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a whole prompt engineering work stream that's getting spun up. But yes, the more context you provide, the more relevant response you would get for your
That's
query,
right.
for sure.
That's right. All right. So final question.
Yes.
So if organizations are, excited and they're eager to start adopting, Copilot in Windows, how do they get started? What does IT departments need to do?
Absolutely.
How do they prepare for it?
Absolutely. Well, first they need to ensure they have the right license, where they have Bing Chat Enterprise. If they do, in the banner, you can clearly see it's Bing Chat for Enterprise. So that's done. Then I encourage, we have a lot of good, we take great pride in transparency, and we have layers of transparency documentation that we publish. We have Learn Mores for Copilot in Windows with BCC, Learn More for Copilot with BCE. We have updated our Microsoft privacy statement. So I encourage, IT admins and even information workers to actually go read about what is our principle for data collection, what rights are we providing to our customers to be able to manage that data. So it gives them that confidence and that comfort of using that feature, and puts them at ease. And then obviously, as we are adding more capabilities, we'll keep, updating this documentation. But it's our way for being transparent, and which we feel is really, really important from a privacy perspective.
So, and then finally, what we know is that Copilot in Windows is not enabled by default in Windows 11 version 22 H2, but it will be by default in 23 H2, correct? And then obviously organizations have the capability of, set with policies and stuff to control it if they want to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's why we want them to keep using it.
Exactly.
And they feel that, they don't feel any apprehension about because we are pretty transparent with what we do with the data.
Yeah, you've laid it out really nicely. You've explained it, how it works, and, whether they have, any concerns and stuff like that. You kind of really explained that really well.
Absolutely.
So I think based on everything you've said, I would be super comfortable in let's do it. Let's start using it.
Absolutely. And I'm using the preview mode and I love it. It just makes my simple tasks easier for summarizing, etc. That would just take me I have a writer's block. So it really, really helps me. So I encourage everybody to use. If I can trust with my privacy,
Exactly.
I'm sure our customers can too.
Yeah. Any final words before we?
No, I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate the time to speak about privacy. I think I want to leave customers with this bit. We are always, we work very closely with engineering teams to ensure that every step of the day we are compliant with all the laws and regulations and all the geolocations.
Right.
And we take it very, very seriously. We are not going to ship anything if it's not, compliant with privacy. So we take great effort going above and beyond to ensure that we build the right experience for our customers.
That's awesome. Let's do this.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here on the show. And I'm so excited I was able to sit down and have this conversation with you.
Thank you for making the trip to Redmond.
No problem. Thanks again. Thank you for watching Tackling Tech. I hope you enjoyed this episode. For more information on Copilot in Windows, please check out the resources listed below. If you have any suggestions or feedback for future episodes, please let us know as well. You can follow me on Twitter or X for more behind the scenes looks of tackling tech. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.